Σας ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ και τώρα θα μας μιλήσει για την εκπαίδευση των φυσικοθεραπευτών στην παγκόσμια κοινότητα ο καθηγητής Mike Landry, ο Πρόεδρος της Παγκόσμιας Ομοσπονδίας.
Dear Professor, dear friend Mike, thank you again to be with us, and we wait with so impatient to hear about the future.
Oh, yeah, I'll tell you what the future is. Yeah. Well, thank you for your kind words and for the introduction. And again, congratulations on the 50th. Actually, I don't think we should say 50th. I mean, you've been in association for 60 years, and you just so happened to join World Physio 50 years ago. But the way I look at it is, you know, once there are groups that might be part of World Physio, and there might be groups that are not yet part of World Physio. But as we move together, we build agency among each other. But congratulations again. So I have a few moments to talk here. And I'll just say a few things. I'm going to focus on education. In my other world, I'm an academic. I'm a health services and policy researcher based in the United States, but my academic appointment is in Norway. A lot of the work that I've done in the past is around workforce and education. So I'm going to share some concepts with you today. And I'll mention, if you like what I'm saying, you can say, well, that's World Physio. If you don't like what I'm saying, no, just say that's Mike Landry, okay? So just so that we're clear. Because what I hope to do in the next few minutes is to maybe encourage some of you, maybe to irritate other people, because I think it is time to be critical of where we are today in physiotherapy. So here we go. Maybe. Yeah, so again, just congratulations. We've said it, Esther Mary and I have said it a few times, but it's absolutely no big effort to come to Greece. It's a fantastic place for us to come, and just forget the environment. It's just so encouraging to see how the association collaborates and works and is complex and is solving problems. Not all member organizations are this sophisticated, and it really is a pleasure to see and watch how things go. Okay. All right. So maybe I'll start with just a few words about World Physiotherapy. We have a vision and there's a purpose, but I think you can really just say that World Physiotherapy is a gathering place for member organizations through their regions around the world. There's a saying in English, it's that the tide rises all boats. So when we work collaboratively and we work together and you see success in Greece, it helps PTs in South America. Just like when success happens in the United States or Japan, it helps Greece. Esther Mary mentioned about advanced practice. There are countries in World Physio who are not just pushing the limit, they are beyond the limit. They are practicing in an advanced capacity. They are ordering investigations. They are, as Esther Mary said, ordering medication. So we are pushing the limits around the world. And as we begin to share that information, I think we meet our purpose. We achieve the dream of collaborating together. A few of our values. Just to maybe point out a few important steps of our own historical development. So World Physio began in 1951. True story. 20,000 or so physiotherapists were members through 11 member organizations, and there are the organizations, you see them there. In the almost 75 years since then, we've grown. We've grown to 127 member organizations, representing, that 600,000 is actually a lot higher than 6,000. It probably is more closer to, on any given day, closer to 700,000. If you looked at that 600,000 or that representation or that size of our global association, it's a big number. Right? But I'll share my wife says I have to share more, so I'll share an experience with you. So a couple weeks ago, I was at the World Health Assembly. This is the gathering in Geneva for the United Nations, the World Health Organization. World Physiotherapy, we are part of something called the World Health Professions Alliance, WHPA. The other groups in the WHPA include the World Medical Association, the World Nursing Association, and the Global Pharmacy Association, and the dentists, and us. So at this meeting, everyone has, all the presidents get up and they present and they discuss a variety of different things. But it usually generally starts with, I'm from the World Medical Association. I represent 14 million physicians around the world. And then the nurses would get up there and say, well, you think that's a big number. We represent 24 million nurses around the world. So when it gets to me, we're a smaller profession, but the world is going to be all about rehabilitation in the near future. That number of 600 represents about 30% of PTs in the world. Now, all of you on the association and others, who work in the area of lobby and politics, when you represent somewhere close to 30% of a population, it's not a strong number. It's a number, and 600,000 is a big number, but it's not enough to be politically powerful, in my view. We are politically powerful, but we could be so much better. So my goal, our goal at World Physiotherapy is to push that 600,000 number closer to 1 million by the time I'm done. Anyway, beyond that, it's not about me. Let's not make it about me. But we are trying to push this number so that we are more representative out there. So every day we wake up thinking, how do we become more global? How do we represent more people, more physiotherapists out there? So I think it's important, the representation size is important in a political environment. Workforce. So I'll just make a few points about workforce and then go into education. So here in Greece, these are what we estimate your numbers are. You have about 10,000, this is 2023 data. You have about 10,000 PTs in the country. About 4,300 or so are members, which means that, here's the number that's important, which means the 9.86. So in workforce or in health services, we think about ratios, number of providers per population. And the denominator we often use is 10,000. So how many nurses per 10,000? How many physicians per 10,000? How many physiotherapists per 10,000? So here in Greece, you're close to 10 PTs per 10,000. Now, if I were to ask you, is that high or low? Is 10 a good number, or are we not? Do we not have enough, or do we have too little? Sadly, we don't know. The estimate number, so if you were to look at North America, we would have much lower numbers than that. Somewhere in the neighborhood of, like in Canada and the United States, somewhere about 5 PTs per 10,000. If you went to the Caribbean islands, you'd have, in general, about 0.2 PTs per 10,000. If you went to Scandinavia, you'd be in the 12 PTs, or sorry, 15 sometimes per 10,000. So the reason why I'm sort of suggesting all this is we still don't know what the right number is. We need to do more work, and we plan to, right? In fact, this came up just yesterday. I mean, Esther Mary and I had a wonderful opportunity to meet with the council just yesterday. Another little story is there's the statue of Athena looking over the council, which I think has some interesting dynamics to it. Anyway, So what we're trying to say here is, that's a number. Is it high or is it low? We still have to start to unpack this. What we do know, though, I might suggest, is that these estimates are based on ideas we've had in the past. What does the practice of physiotherapy look like? How do we actually provide care? I'm going to argue, and again, hopefully irritate and upset some of you, is that the future, by the way, when I say the future, I mean in the next 5 years, technology is going to disrupt us in such a fashion that we might not be able to recognize some of the elements of what you do every day in physiotherapy. I think we're very, very close to major disruption. Healthcare is the industry that is the most disruptible of all industries in the world. If you look at oil, if you look at any other major industry, they have changed. Healthcare has been limited to really change very much. So I give you this as background only, because we don't know if this is a good or maybe not so good number. Just a little bit about us again. These slides might be a little bit out of order, but just to make a point, when I said we represent about 30%, it's because we estimate in the world there is something like 2 million physiotherapists. Now, it's an estimate, because there are some countries who are working with us, working with our fantastic staff to become a member of World Physiotherapy. Some of them are in huge, huge countries that have billions of people. And it's not always clear what is a physiotherapist. How would we define what a physiotherapist is? So given our data, our denominator is 2 million right there. And if we were to divide, for instance, some of our member organizations into small, medium, and large and extra large, this is how it kind of plays out. Small point, there's 13 very large organizations, and by that, there are more than 10,000 members. Japan has 170,000. France, 75,000. United States. So we have in our midst around the world small organizations. For instance, there's one Caribbean island with 7 members, through to Japan with over 100,000. So this is a bit of our diversity of size. Okay, this is not as important. We'll move on. And I hope we have a chance maybe for some questions later or something. So the point is, we're large. Representatively, we need to get more representative. We're not sure what is the right number of workforce that we should have or need to have, and what kind of training they're going to have. In my view, and I suspect most of you would agree, that a physiotherapist is not a physiotherapist. For instance, under no condition should I, as a registered and licensed physiotherapist, ever be in a pediatric intensive care unit. Like, never, right? But you do want me in a sports environment, and you do want me whenever there's an emergency response, strategy required. So my capacity, my own personal skills are very different than many of you. And similarly, you're very different than me. So when I say things like, 10 PTs per 10,000 here in Greece, again, it's such a big number. It's not very specific. And if we look at the dynamics of the world, an aging population, what's the average age in Greece? Do we know, like 82? Oh, that's a good number. I hope I get there. Wow, 82. Other countries, a lot less. But if you have if your average age is 82, which would probably mean that men are in the 70s and then women are more than 82, that's usually how it works. Is it about the same? Wow. Well, there's an rapprochement. Interesting, yeah. Well, men, Good job. Nice. Yeah. The idea is that we have an aging population. The minister himself said it very clearly, better to have care closer to someone's home. That's the cost-effective equation that makes the most sense. Now, it's not always easy to enact that. The trajectory changes. But what I'm saying is, are we planning for the future? Are we training our workforce, our students, for tomorrow, or are we training them for yesterday? And I'll be honest, well, let me go back to here. When I think it was maybe Petros who put up the slide, or somebody had a slide of like 1972 in the lab, the student lab, right? Does it look any different today? No. Maybe different hairstyles, right? There was somebody smoking a cigarette, that was cool, you know? Maybe there's less of that in the lab, but have we really re-engineered us? Have we really planned for the future? And I'm going to suggest not really. At World Physio, we created and produced an educational framework, and I think somebody made reference to it earlier today, so wonderful. So I'll pass that on to our staff who worked tirelessly on this. It's a fairly complicated outline of a competency, or at least an educational framework that could be integrated. We developed this for a lot of our member organizations who wanted to modernize their curriculum. And so this document was really established to elevate and almost standardize and normalize the basic level. This framework is it's the minimum. It's not the ceiling, it's the floor, right? So it's the basics. But nevertheless, it's quite elaborate. It does outline that education doesn't end on graduation. So I see there's students back here. You might be thinking, oh, I might be done soon. Not true, not true. It's continuing education for the rest of your lives. And this is how we improve. This is how we gain confidence. This is how we actually become better at our craft. So in this document, if you have a chance to look at it, you'll see a lot of elaborate information that takes you down a path and creates some interesting dimensions. I think Petros also mentioned something about 1,000 hours of clinical exposure or clinical education. So I agree, in some countries it's higher, in some countries it's lower. But this is the first point of possible irritation for you. But let me ask you, how do we know it's 1,000? Maybe it's less. Or maybe we need to take a different view at education and think about competency training. For instance, when I was a student, let's say, I'm being kind to myself, but let's say I scored 70% on my anatomy courses. Right? Well, I got to move forward because 70 is a pass, so you move on. And then you kind of keep moving on. So we have people in education, we just keep pushing them as groups when they hit a certain threshold. Well, maybe that 30% that I missed, maybe it was important, right? Maybe that 30% was important. So what if we started thinking about competency training? What if we started thinking about personalized education? Maybe I will take a lot longer than those 1,000 hours to meet certain basic competencies, whereas somebody else would be able to achieve them in a lot shorter time frame. But our education systems don't often have that ability to be so flexible. And so you move learners in certain blocks. And so I think we have to start considering where we are. Are there ways that we can shorten the education exposure? Are there ways that we might need to extend it for certain types of people, certain types of learners? We're all different. If we all present here today with chronic, non-radiating low back pain, common diagnosis, but we're all a little different. And the same thing with learners. So the question I'm asking you is, have we created systems that can capture that nuance? Yeah. there's more stuff there. Yeah, there's more stuff. A lot of this is in that document. But what I wanted to get to is probably this slide here. So, because I think my time is getting close. The other thing is technology. So if the pandemic, by the way, the pandemic was great years for me. It's fantastic. Because I got to stay at home. I got to stay at home. I got to spend time with my children. You know, we're of a certain economic class that was pretty, you know, my investments went up in the United States. Like if you actually had, and there was stimulus money that was pushing. So in hindsight, pandemic was a great time for me, right? Technology, you could attend meetings, you could do all kinds of things. I'm being kind of facetious, like it wasn't a great time, but let's just for fun say it was. Well, so we used all this kind of technology in education to keep students moving. We implemented technology for online digital care, right? And then the moment, at least in North America, when when the pandemic, you know, was over, or if it ever existed, then all of a sudden we just stopped using digital technologies in not everyone, not at all conditions, but in a lot of scenarios. So the question is, where and how are we integrating technology into our education systems? In the future, are there competencies that those young physio students at the back are going to require in order to be able to solve the problems of the future and not the past? Do we, for instance, do we need to increase the competencies of those students to be data analysts? Or to understand how and somebody mentioned artificial intelligence, do they need to understand how artificial intelligence is going to disrupt their clinical practice? So are we training our students for the future or for yesterday? So with that, I'll stop, and hopefully we have a chance at some point to have some questions, and I really appreciate the opportunity to attempt to irritate a little bit of you today in terms, and make you think. Are we really training for the future, or is this more of the past? Thank you.